Hi, everybody. We're here at Gallifrey One in Los Angeles, and I'm sitting here with Joy Piedmont.
Hi.
Co-host of the Reality Bomb podcast. If you're not familiar with the podcast, it's a great one. I will leave a link to their page in the description below the video. But we're talking with Joy today about the pilgrimage. Mm-hmm. And Joy actually did an audio essay on Reality Bomb, episode 59, I believe, about her experience doing the pilgrimage, and I just had a few follow-up questions I wanted to ask her about it, and so she's agreed to sit here with me today to talk about it. So thank you, Joy.
No problem. Thank you for asking.
So in regard to your pilgrimage experience, how were you watching Doctor Who before you decided to take the pilgrimage?
So that's a good question. My origin story for fandom is that I'm a teacher, and my students in 2012 said, "You're a nerd. You would love Doctor Who. You should watch this show." And I thought, oh, maybe not right now. I was like binge watching Friday Night Lights at the time, and but over the summer, I started watching the show, and then in a couple months, I watched modern Who series 1 to I guess 6 at that point.
So you watched in order?
Yeah, I watched in order, Modern Who, and then I was caught up that fall with series 7A. So I was caught up by, I want to say Town Called Mercy, possibly even a little later than that. It might have been Power of Three, but I was caught up by that September. It took me a summer to get through the whole Modern series up to that point.
That is fast.
It was pretty fast. Sometimes I watched like 4 episodes in a day. So watched Modern series in order, caught up, and then I was just watching the show, right, as it aired. Snowman aired in that winter, watched that. Somewhere, I guess, along early 2013, with a lot of the 50th anniversary hype, I decided I'd like to see some classic Who. You know, like I have friends who are really, old school fans who've been in it for a while, and I think that classic Who fans tend to be not prophets. What's the other word that I'm thinking of? Apostles, right? For to stick with this religious theme, this semi-religious theme. Everybody's trying to spread the good news of the classic Who. So I watched whatever was on Netflix at the time, streaming. I think it was the Aztecs and.
So was the Aztecs the first classic Who that you saw? Mm-hmm. Okay, first Doctor.
So I was still doing it in order, but it was just whatever was available through Netflix.
I see. So if whatever was there,
and
that wasn't too many stories, as I recall.
It wasn't. They only had one for the first Doctor. So I wanted to start in order, right, as much as I could. So first Doctor, I thought.
So you were pretty chronological from the beginning.
I'm a concrete thinker. I am what I would describe as one of my, when I describe my students sometimes like this, I'm a concrete thinker. I can think abstractly, but it takes me a little bit more work. My default is I think linearly and right in logical fashion. So the Aztecs was the only one available, so I thought I'll start there. Then I watched The Mind Robber. And I think I made it to the next one available would have been a third Doctor, and I can't remember if I watched it or not before my partner at the time, was saying I think I'm kind of interested in getting into Doctor Who because I had been watching it, obsessed with it. And he said, but I want to start from the beginning because he is a extremely concrete thinker, chronological, likes to experience
even more than you.
Even more than me. I was totally fine skipping over and just getting whatever Netflix had. And he said, yeah, we should start with the very first episode, First Doctor. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'm in for that. And, it didn't take much pushing for me. And I didn't realize at the time that was called The Pilgrimage. I was like, we're just watching the classic show. And
that's how you got started.
That's how I got started, yeah. So we just started watching
he dropped off before you finished?
So we broke up. And so we broke up around the time of, I want to say, Clause of Access.
It's funny how you dated according to where you were.
I know. I know exactly where it was. We broke up around the time of Clause of Access, and there was a little pause there for me. That would have been around fall of 2014? No, fall of 2014. Yes. Sorry. I'm just trying to figure out the dates in my head.
This is a side point, but Riley was just telling me how she was doing a podcast with someone. They were doing the pilgrimage together, and then the podcast ended up ending, and they also ended their friendship, and that was around Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So,
It's easy, right? Like we as fans, we mark our lives in who. So we think about like, oh, this episode was airing at this time in my life. It's really easy to remember. Like I remember, during this breakup that I was going through, the last episode that I talked to my ex about was Kill the Moon. It's just like, right, we remember
funny,
these
yeah.
kinds of things. So yeah, we stopped watching together at Claws of Access. I took a little break, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna keep going, right? It didn't take much for me to decide I'm gonna just keep going with this by myself, right? So yeah, then soldiered on, and we finished, sometime last year, I guess, whenever I did the editorial.
So, and you mean that you finished the classic series
Yeah.
for Survival by that time? You spoke of the pilgrimage in your audio essay as a special milestone in a Whovian's life. Do you think, or do you recommend that every fan do this at some point in their fan career? Is it only for some people?
So I hesitate to say that it's only for some people, because I don't think we should gatekeep this experience. If somebody wants to do it, I think absolutely they should. I don't think it is going to be a thing that everybody wants to do or will enjoy doing though, for a couple reasons, right? Like I think that there's an access issue. It's really hard to find the stories. I had to cobble together my pilgrimage in various ways, right? Like just in terms of getting the episodes. And I think a lot of people have more fun with the show when they can jump around. I think there are a lot of viewers who enjoy the spirit of the show as a time travel show where you can just like bounce between second Doctor and fifth Doctor and then go back to the fourth Doctor. And some people only want to watch the good ones first, right? So there's all different ways to experience the show. But I think that for a certain kind of fan, it is absolutely a milestone.
Would you say that watching it this way changed your perception of the show? Or did it just enhance it?
No, totally changed my perception of the show. I think that there are a lot of things that I noticed over time where I thought, from little things like in the Sensorites when Susan describes Gallifrey, I cried a little because I remembered the moment in Gridlock when the 10th Doctor describes it using the same words to Martha. And, it was funny because my ex hadn't seen Gridlock because he wasn't going to be there until whenever, right? And he was like, oh, what's, I was like, they use these words. And so having that experience, I was like, oh, I'm now seeing this show that I already love, the modern show, in a totally new light now, and thinking about like all the ways that the modern show connects back to the original series, right, or classic series. So that changed my perception. Seeing the evolution of the character really gives you an entirely different perspective on who the Doctor is, and the Doctor is our central character, right? And so that can completely change your perception, and then also to see the different kinds of storytelling that can be done through the show really opens your eyes to how expansive it is. And I think if you just watch the modern series, you probably already have a sense that it is a show that can transcend any genre. But if you're watching Classic Who also, you truly understand that it has gone through various waves and periods, and when you watch it in order, you can actually see that play out over time.
Yeah. Some people do this when they do the pilgrimage, and some people don't. They'll watch the recons. And I understand you did watch the recons, or?
So yeah, some recons, and then some just audio with the stills, which I guess are recons in some way, right? But yeah, we did the audios. And
do you think there's a way of watching them and enjoying it? Or did you not? Were you just a completist and like, well, I have to get through this?
No,
or did you actually like doing it?
It depends on the story. Some of them are great, and you can just imagine how wonderful it probably is if only like right if you had the existing episode. Oh gosh, now I can't remember the name of the story, but the one where Ian is a knight and one of the titles is the Lion of Jaffa, but now I can't.
Crusade.
The Crusade,
Yeah.
right. Like, I wish we had the Crusade. There's some William Hartnell speeches in that are so good. And it comes through because it's just the quality of his voice, right? But you wish you could also see him. So that's still enjoyable. It's just not as enjoyable as it would be.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the animations do just as much work, right? Like, and so that's great. The Savages is not good. And so listening to it, it doesn't sound fun. It's not fun to listen to. Space Pirates, also not fun.
And they might have been to watch, but probably not as good just audio.
But it's not. It's really hard. Some of them are really, really hard to get through, and then others are fun. But
you decided I'm doing it, right?
yeah, because otherwise, like you're missing part of the experience. They're not completely missing. If they were texts that you could never access in any way, then it's like, okay, I'm not watching that story. But like Underwater Menace. When I was going through the pilgrimage, right, there was audio, and so you get to listen to the audio and see some stills from it and think, God, what a weird show I watched.
Yeah.
And it's really good. I like Underwater Menace. Macroterror, also, like, there's so many high quality stories that are worth experiencing in some way, right? And I think people should give it a shot.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest thing to do. But I would recommend, actually, for some people, it helps to read along with a script or like a transcript.
Yeah. As I understand it, it took you close to 5 years to complete this pilgrimage.
Yeah. So
What was the pace that you were when you weren't taking a break? At what pace were you watching?
I could watch like a story a night, and that's usually like between 4 and 6 episodes, right?
Were you doing it every night or like a couple stories a week?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depended. So when I was with my ex, we would do either between one episode, so like one 20-minute episode, up to maybe like 4, so a complete story. It kind of just depended on the night and what we were watching. That's why it took, a little bit of time to get through to the Third Doctor for us. Because we started in 2013. So it took a little over a year to get to 3, which is a slowish pace, right? Once I was on my own, I watched at a little bit more of a regular pace, with the caveat that in the Fourth Doctor's Sarah Jane season, I really slowed down. Which I know is
because you weren't enjoying it?
Yeah, I mean,
controversial.
I like Sarah, Harry, and the Doctor.
But after Harry left, you weren't so keen?
Yeah, I did not love the stories as much. I did not love the dynamic between them. And so I just kind of, when you're not enjoying the show as much, you kind of just
you're not as anxious to get to the next one.
Yeah, so I slowed down a lot during that time, and that took me a while, but then I got through Leela really quickly and Romana, and once there were companions again who I kind of connected to, started to pick up the pace a little bit. Again, stalled a little bit with Davison, because it's just this time it was the stories were not grabbing me. It took me a year to get through Colin Baker.
And that was only 2 seasons.
Yeah, I did not enjoy that era of the show, so it took me a year to get through that.
And that goes for both season 22 and season 23, which were very different from one another.
Although easier to get through 23, right? For me, at least, I started to feel like, okay, I kind of can connect to this a little bit more, but it was hard, very hard.
And then smooth sailing for McCoy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that, I think it took me a month. Once I hit McCoy, I was like, oh, this is going to be over soon, because he's so good, and those stories are so good.
And his seasons are short.
His seasons are short, right? There's not as much of it.
For those of people who are thinking about doing this, what recommendations do you have for them to make their experience as enjoyable as possible?
So I would say take it one story at a time, in the same way that if you were to set a goal for yourself to run a marathon, you're not going out tomorrow and running 26 miles. You have to train. And so, in a similar way, right, to do the pilgrimage, you can't think to yourself, oh my gosh, I have to get through, 20 plus years of this show, and how am I going to do this? And like, right? It can be paralyzing to think about the enormity of it. You just think, all right, I'm going to sit down and watch Unearthly Child. How am I going to get access? Like, am I going to watch it on BritBox? Do I have DVDs? Okay, next story. How do I have access to this? Like, I think there's no rush, and so if people just kind of take it easy, it'll happen. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So that would be my advice.
Okay. Would you ever do this again, or do you have any other plans for like a different kind of a marathon? Or
so that's a really good question. I have some friends right now who are like, yeah, I think I'm going to do the pilgrimage. Like, I think it's ready. I think it's time for me, and I'm excited for them. And there is this part of me that's like, yeah, maybe I'll just do it again. But I think it's too soon. I think it's too soon. I want to think of it like when you read a book in your childhood and you revisit it when you're older, you get something different out of it. I'd like to give myself enough space and time to revisit the show and come at it with a new perspective in some way. Otherwise, I'm just rewatching stuff that I already kind of know how I feel about it. Right, and that's not as much fun. I was thinking I might do some sort of thematic watching. I've had a little bit of an inkling of an idea that maybe I'll go through along with the Writers' Room podcast and do it by writer.
By writer, yeah.
It was a
have you
passing
already
notion.
listened to the Writers' Room podcast?
Yes.
And you just go back
yeah.
to
And so I have a spreadsheet of every episode or every story of Doctor Who, and it says the production code, the number,
concrete
the
person
year.
right here.
Very logical, concrete thinker. Love spreadsheets. And the writer, the director, and then I also have in other columns the number of the episode that RFS did a commentary, what the number of the episode is when the Writers' Room talked about it, and if it's a Gallery of the Underrated, I have the number in there. Because those are kind of like, I mean, before I was on Reality Bomb, those were 3 podcasts I listened to fairly regularly, and I knew to do like serious commentary on, episodes in a fairly like completist kind of way. Yeah. So I was following that as I finished stories. I would go and like see, in episode blah, 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 like RFS did a commentary, and then I'd load that up and listen to it after I finished.
Dedication, right there.
It's also probably why it took me a little longer, right, to finish it, because I was doing a lot of like ancillary. Like,
but that makes it more enjoyable, right? The experience. I mean,
for some people,
you. Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hear stories about fans when they were young and they were, making all these lists and everything, even before there was the internet and writing all these lists. So it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joy, for sharing your experience with us.
Thanks for asking me, yeah.
And where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Yes, I am on Twitter at InquiringJoy, and people should follow me there and follow at RealityBombPC, which is Reality Bomb's Twitter handle.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Bye.